Following several developing stories, by the way, on the legal front today. First, the Trump administration taking its fight to use the Alien Enemies Act to the Supreme Court. It's asking the High Court to resume mass deportation flights of what it calls violent terrorists and gangs. Let's bring in CBS News legal contributor Caroline Polisi. Caroline, thanks for joining us today. This case put the Trump administration's use of the Alien Enemies Act to the legal test. So what are we expecting to see here?
Yeah, this is a big deal that, they're appealing to the Supreme Court. Interestingly, it was Judge Boasberg, who you just talked about, who has the Signalgate case, who ordered a temporary restraining order blocking the Trump administration from using this often not employed act, the Alien Enemies Act, that's usually only reserved for times of war. The Trump administration was using that as the authority to deport many Venezuelan nationals who were here, they say, as part of this, very, very violent gang. And the judge ordered a blocking of those deportations and even to turn planes around that had already left. Now, the issue here will be whether or not the Supreme Court steps in and denies that temporary restraining order so that the administration can resume that policy. And it's one of probably the biggest questions that the Supreme Court has gotten within these first several months of the Trump administration.
And strong words today, by the way, from the Trump administration to international students here on visas. Secretary of State Marco Rubio had this harsh warning. We'll hear that and then talk to you on the other side.
We gave you a visa to come and study and get a degree, not to become a social activist that tears up our university campus. I think it's crazy to invite students into your country that are coming onto your campus and destabilizing it. We're just not going to have it. So we'll revoke your visa, and once your visa is revoked, you're illegally in the country and you have to leave.
So, Caroline, you just heard what Rubio had to say. How will First Amendment and due process issues factor into this policy?
Yeah, and we've seen a slew of recent apprehensions of non-citizen, although legally here, students with student visas and or green cards being apprehended by ICE, DHS, and the idea is that they're going to revoke their visa status so that they have to be deported. None of these students, by the way, have engaged in what would be considered criminal conduct. As you noted there, Marco Rubio is saying merely that they essentially don't like the speech that they've engaged in, the allegations that they've engaged in somehow pro-Palestinian or pro-Hamas type speech on their campuses. The reason why this is problematic is they're using a different statute, not the Alien Enemies Act, but a statute that says essentially that the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has the power if he deems that there are any people here in the country that are non-citizens, not even illegally, but if they're non-citizens and he feels that they are potentially a threat to the national security, he can revoke their status. And so the question is that statute being applied constitutionally such that everybody within the United States, whether they're a citizen or not, has First Amendment protections? And because they're implementing the statute on the grounds, it seems now only on the basis of First Amendment protected speech, is that going to be upheld as a constitutional way to interpret this statute? And I think that will be another issue that reaches the Supreme Court.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it's going to be a big deal. I want to ask you about this because attorneys for pro-Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil are in a New Jersey courtroom today as they continue to fight for his release. Why has the case been moved there, and what do you think could come next?
Yeah, a lot of arguments back and forth about where this case should be heard. Remember, he was apprehended at Columbia, then he was moved further down the country, now back in New Jersey. And the issue, you really go into a black box when you get apprehended and the federal government, the Bureau of Prisons, is involved. But the idea, some have speculated, is that they were essentially, the government was forum shopping for courts that would be sort of more conciliatory to their deportation stance, and that they didn't want to be in a New York court, they wanted to be in a more favorable jurisdiction. The reason it's in New Jersey now, it's more of a where the conduct took place is the allegation. But this is going to be one of those cases that has the potential to reach the Supreme Court because we don't know all of the facts yet, but the government has not alleged any criminal conduct thus far for this student, again, only that he had potentially engaged in pro-Hamas protests last year on Columbia's campus. So we'll see where the case goes from here.